Radio.
Great, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Shit Radio, an unrefined podcast for the everyman. Our next topic tonight is going to be a real fun, interesting topic, and I know I'm very enthusiastic to talk about it, and Lars didn't know much about it, but I sent Lars over some information. We're going to talk about one of the greatest frontmen in the history of rock and roll, one of the most entertaining people who's ever lived, who should have been successful, taking over a radio show and probably the biggest flop in the history of radio, the David Lee Roth Show. Lars, what can you tell us about the David Lee Roth Show? Just the basic facts, and then I was someone who listened and so was wasted. So we're going to add in our own spice and our own opinions here. But what can you tell us factually about the David Lee Roth Show? Especially since you were a big Howard Stern fan, and he was the one who replaced Howard Stern on terrestrial radio here on the East Coast of America.
Absolutely. So this is all news to me. I never even heard of the David Lee Roth Show, and because up in Canada by the end of the Howard Stern show, we picked up, like, Canada wasn't even broadcasting Howard Stern anymore. We were picking it up off of American stations that we were getting because we were so close to the border. But the David Lee Roth Show was a nationally syndicated radio show hosted by obviously David Lee Roth, and it only aired for a few months, from January 3rd to April 21st, 2006. And it was simulcast on 7 stations owned by CBS Radio. And the 7 stations were obviously big markets in the U.S. And yeah, I guess it just fizzled out. People didn't like it. And it was the term that was often used to describe it was pirate radio, and it featured ethnic and non-commercial rock music. David Lee Roth told personal stories. He had uncomfortable debates and had interviews with people that Roth admired. And I think one of the people was David Lee Roth's uncle, Manny Roth. So yeah, I'll let you guys take it from here, but that's a brief synopsis of what happened and on the David Lee Roth Show.
So basically what happened is Howard Stern left to go to satellite radio. And when he left to go to satellite radio, CBS was losing their biggest ratings. Howard Stern's ratings were sometimes 20 shares, in major markets, which is just unheard of. He had tens of millions of people.
Yeah.
And on the East Coast, you got David Lee Roth Show. On the West Coast, you got the Adam Carolla Show. The Adam Carolla Show is still around now in podcasts. It says it has found success in podcasts. Adam Carolla originally did Loveline with Dr. Drew. So he was a radio veteran. He knew how to run a radio show. It wasn't a great radio show, and I wouldn't say it's a great podcast, but it was entertaining. Adam Carolla, also known from being one of the original hosts of The Man Show with Complete Solid and Soy Boy Jimmy Kimmel. But on the East Coast, we got David Lee Roth. And people were so excited. Now, David Lee Roth did his first test shows here in Boston. He came up and he did them on WZLX. And boy, they were weird. So he was getting ready to go take over Stern's spot in New York. And they were just really weird shows. So he's taking over from Howard Stern, who at the time was the king of shock jock radio, the most talked about person in all of radio. And Roth takes over. And David Lee Roth, you're expecting, because he's a very entertaining person, very charismatic, very funny, very intelligent, you're expecting he's going to have at least an entertaining show. Sure, he's going to lose some of the audience, but, people are going to want to listen because, you want to know what he's going to say next, just like Howard Stern at the time. Well, you turn on David Lee Roth, he had his own band in studio, which was they were playing reggae, I wouldn't even say jazz, but it was a mixture of reggae. There's people playing bongos. It was David Lee Roth just playing music for 5 minutes straight and just randomly screaming and making noise in the background. And he'd get on and he'd speak and he'd just go on these rambles just like someone that would be like high on LSD or ecstasy and just ramble on about the most absurd things. And he'd be like, all right, and now we're gonna go listen to some more sweet drums. And you just hear some guy playing on the drums, boom, 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 boom. And it made absolute no sense. So like after the first week, like anyone who was tuning in just stopped listening. He went from, taking over Howard Stern, who I said earlier was pulling in like New York City at the time, like almost 10 million people just listening in the New York City tri-state area, which is New Jersey, Connecticut, New York City itself, some of the boroughs in New York, Long Island, New York State. He had a huge audience, and like he it just went down to like almost last place, and he was insane. Like nothing about the show made sense. Like even when he had celebrities on, he wouldn't like. They're like, okay, we're here to promote this movie, and he just started talking about like, hey man, you ever been to Brazil? It was just absolute absurdity. And this continued for like the first like 2 months until they're like, all right, we got to get rid of this guy. So eventually they fired Dave Lee Roth, and they brought in Opie Anthony, who was Howard Stern's biggest competition and rivals. They were in afternoons and they were pulling in huge ratings at the time. Back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were got fired for their Sex for Sam stunt. Pretty much got kicked off radio for 2 years. CBS made him wait out the contract. When the contract ended in '04, they went to satellite radio, started building an audience back again. And CBS agreed with XM Radio that they could simulcast the show at CBS on XM satellite radio for the first 3 hours, and Opie and Anthony would do an additional 2 hours on XM. So they brought that in to stop the bleeding. Opie and Anthony came in, they got the ratings back up, not up to Stern levels, but they got it up to respectable levels. Opie and Anthony then lasted until 2009 until they got fired again. But the David Lee Roth show, and now wasted, if you're in a good space to talk and it's kind of quieted down there, I want you to describe the insanity of David Lee Roth.
Of David Lee Roth or the Roth show, like
Yes.
compared to, I mean, what the radio station wanted was Howard Stern, a Howard Stern type show, but he just did whatever he wanted to, like sort of guerrilla radio, and he was just playing music that wasn't really even it wasn't syndicated music. It was just whatever he likes, and just like reggae and
African
uh,
tribesman music or Aborigine music. I mean, he would just be out of his mind.
and he's always talking about, he's always talking, goes back into the roots of music. And when after did he get fired or he quit?
Oh, yeah.
Because they wanted to get rid of him. I'm not sure I don't know exactly what the fans thought, but there's definitely from the radio station, they just were saying like, what are you doing? You're supposed to be, and he was saying in response that, I'm not Howard Stern. I'm like a loose cannon. That's what I do. I can't be Howard Stern. That was his explanation of it. He's just going to be David Lee Roth. He's not going to try to be Howard Stern. But I think what happened is after that show, he started up a podcast called Roth Show, The Roth Show. And it's exactly the same. But in the podcast world, it's like he's invented like a new genre of podcasting because he has music playing, like you said, like Aboriginal music or funk. He has like funk or disco music playing in the background as he rants about a subject. And it might just be like the where rock and roll, where funk music came from, and it came from Africa. And he goes on these long, and they're not a long format thing. It's like 10-20 minutes of Roth just riffing and talking about anything he wants to, but with a soundtrack in the background. So it's almost like in some points, he's actually trying to write new songs. So he's sort of writing music on the show, like using the beat of the music, and then he's kind of rapping or singing.
Fire.
Plays hip hop.
Yes.
He played hip hop music.
He would literally stop talking and just not say a word. You just have music play for like 20 minutes. And I don't think you'd hear, like, he'd be in the background just making noises.
Really? I need to find a way to get some of these shows. I'm sure I can find one if I look hard enough. But this
I'm sure
it sounds amazing.
You can listen to the Roth show. It's basically the same. The Roth show is a podcast, and it's
Right.
basically the same thing. same format. It's just completely random. You don't know whether he's going to be talking about his dog or his dad, or he's going to be Aboriginal music, or yeah. And
Can
he's
I
not very consistent with the podcast either. Pops up now and again.
I have a very weird take on it. Now, Howard Stern, which most people don't know, a lot of Howard Stern jokes, a lot of his segments, that's all his writers. That was not Howard Stern. That was Jackie the Joke Man. That was Billy West. That was Artie carrying him. That was other people behind the scenes like Fred Norris. It wasn't Howard. Howard's a very, very good interviewer, but he's not the creative genius people think he is. David Lee Roth is a creative genius. My crazy take on this is if you actually had an executive producer that could have harnessed David Lee Roth and got him focused and kept him on track and let him do some of the things he wanted to do, he could have been different enough from Stern, but still entertaining enough because the man can hold a conversation. Like if you've ever seen David Lee Roth on Joe Rogan, he's incredibly interesting as a human being. And I think he could probably be a hell of an interviewer. I just think they didn't have the right people in place. They threw him in the deep end with not enough radio experience and just relying on the star power and the charisma. And they didn't have someone to harness him to like go, okay, David, you want to do this? Let's do it this segment. And I know you want to do segment 2 this way. So we'll do segment 1 this way. Segment 2, we'll do the way you want it to. But worked with him and actually, like, kind of like how do I say this? Groomed him into the position to be a really great radio host because I think he had and still has the potential to do that. Because the man's funny, like he's very funny. They should have had someone, and this is probably partially David Lee Roth's fault, but they should have had a co-host with him that would have been able to guide him, and he was kind of just left alone to his own creative decisions, which wasn't a good choice. Now, originally he wasn't the first choice, even taking over for Howard Stern. Originally, they wanted to get like Artie and some of the other former Stern people and just keep going with that formula. Now, that wouldn't work in today's society, but I still think David Lee Roth show would work in today's society because he wasn't a shock jock. He was just somebody that was way out there. I think he was, how do I say this? He had the potential to be like Joe Rogan well before Joe Rogan.
Right.
Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, it makes perfect
Yeah,
sense.
but he's not really a host. He's not really a host. He's the show. Like he doesn't need guests. He comes up with the question and then he answers his own question. Then he makes jokes. And he just keeps rambling and talking and coming up every episode he says something like genius.
Yeah, but what I'm saying
So
is if he had a director wasted, he had a director and somebody that he felt comfortable and trusted as a co-host, like I have you guys where I can bounce stuff off you guys. If he had that, that would have just made him a better host. Because the genius is there, the jokes are there, the intelligence is there. It wasn't organized. There wasn't a clear path, and they just let him go crazy, and that's what he did. It was like if Colonel Kurtz had a radio station in Apocalypse Now. Is the best way to describe the David Lee Roth show.
yeah, I don't think they were they were complaining the whole time about what are you doing? This isn't what we want. We want the Howard Stern 2 type show. And he was saying, I can't do that. I'm just gonna do what I do. So they couldn't get anybody to help him because he didn't want to be helped, sort of thing. He just wanted to do that.
But how do you go into the hiring phase, replacing the biggest name in radio history?
Yeah, it's just a
No,
bad idea.
yeah, but like there was so much time. Like I told you, he did test shows, and the test shows were just like this regular show. Like they had time to work on this. They had time to go, okay, this is what works. This is what you like doing. How do we combine what works and what you like doing to get a better show? I really think that the show had potential. I still think it does.
Yeah, I think
Because
he needed like a host to host the show, and he would be the co-host that would, like, the host would keep it on track, and then um, he would almost be doing like a free-form interview with the host every week. I think
my
that
God,
would
David,
work better.
if by any chance you're one of our Sheet radio listeners, dear God,
Gee.
buddy, just let me know. Just let me know. We'll get you on the
But if
straight and narrow.
but if you like wild podcasts, he's got one.
Wires,
Yes.
you're in the podcasting. You actually love doing this, and I'm glad that I talked you into it a long time ago. Like, hey, come on, do a show with me. Be a guest. And many people might not know this, but when I started my old show, uh, Lyers wasn't the original co-host. He was just a guest. Me and Lyers have been friends well before that. So I had Lyers on just as a guest, and we just had such great chemistry. I'm like, brother, come on in. I'm going to make you one of my co-hosts. And it was originally him and ET, and then ET, had his ambient fun. So ET left. And, we were having Wasted on as a guest here and there, and we just loved Wasted so much we had the chemistry. But that's how things work. Bring people together that have chemistry, and you find out what works, where you can bounce and have conversation. And like, we hope you as a listener, and if any of you guys made it this far into the show, we really appreciate you. We hope you're enjoying it. We want you to feel like you're sitting around at the bar table with us having a conversation. I want to ask you, Lars, after you hear this David Lee Roth thing, I really want to hear your thoughts on it, because it's just there's brilliance in there, buddy. There really is.
So I from without hearing it and with the show that is, and listening to what's been said about it, it's obvious to me that he he got inside his own head way too much, and he wanted to do too much, and it just didn't translate that well onto radio. And I think the executives were quick to give up on him, probably too quick. And by the sounds of it, I think you're spot on when you say that if he had had some handlers or some producers who were a little bit better at handling David Lee Roth and his vision of what the show could have been, I think it would have lasted a lot longer. Um, you know, I love the idea of uh, world music. I love the idea of having his own band in there and playing uh, non-conventional music. I one of the quotes I read in the article that you sent me about it was that one of the reasons they fired him is because they wanted to cater more to uh, the the male crowd from, what was it, 18 to 34, that likes Leonard Skinner, right? Sure, that's the money guys that are talking right there. Those are the advertising dollars you have to get to have this show be successful. You need that revenue generated, right? But I don't think I don't think David Lee Roth saw his show as a show like that, right? He wanted to be different. And this is the executives, they're guilty of not doing their due diligence, because they should have seen this way before this show even went on air, that their path and their vision of the show was not the same as what David Lee Roth obviously had, right? So I think there's by the sounds of it, I think there's a lot of entertainment there, and I think there was a pretty solid show that could have happened, but was given up on a little bit too early. And
Lars, yeah, you're the EP. You're the one running David Lee Roth show. You said, David, you want to talk music because that's what you love. Listen, I got Roger Waters booked this week. You and Roger Waters are going to sit around the studio for 4 hours. You guys are going to talk. On
yeah,
Tuesday, I got Oliver Stone coming in. You guys are going to sit around. You guys are going to talk. On Wednesday, I got one of the Gallagher brothers coming in. You're going to sit around. You're going to talk with one of the Gallagher brothers, from Oasis. Hey, on Thursday, I got this new young rapper named Kanye West coming in. You want to talk hip hop? Let's talk hip hop. Have him with like, RZA or someone like that on Friday. You could have expanded your audience beyond your 18 to 49-year-old white male, and you could have got the 18 to 49-year-old male audience of all races and gender with David Lee Roth. And I think that was the missed opportunity. Like, he wants to talk music, he wants to talk rap, he wants to talk all this different type of music. Well, great, let's get him some interesting people to talk to and that can bounce off David Lee Roth. Could you imagine what like Roger Waters and David Lee Roth would get into talking, or Kanye West and David Lee Roth?
it would be amazing. The 3-4 hours of what the show would have been would have gone by seemingly you know what I mean? Like with in no time, would have just gone by in no time. And
They
The
missed the
stories that those two guys would tell would be second to none. I mean, you got David Lee Roth, the frontman of one of the biggest American rock and roll bands of all time, and you got Roger Waters. Of course, this is all hypothetical and conjecture, but and then you got Roger Waters, who was the lead singer of one of the biggest bands coming out of England, right? Man, these guys' stories that they could have told together would have been phenomenal, and listening to they and if they had given David Lee Roth some creative freedom to explore some of his segments that he wanted to do, he could have maybe played some world music with Roger Waters, or you know what I mean? Or they could have talked about different influences from around the world because these guys have traveled the world 4, 5, 6 times over. Do you know what I mean? And
you could have had different point of views on and had
yeah,
David Lee Roth with his strong
yeah,
personality going
yeah,
back and forth with somebody. They didn't lean into it enough. Sometimes you have to go, okay, this is what you want, David. I'll compromise with you, but I'm gonna let you, be you. But at the same time, I'm gonna give something that's entertaining and something that the audience is gonna want to listen to. They just gave up. They listened to a few shows and like, shit, this isn't gonna work. How do we get out of the contract?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because
That's what I think happened.
he's basically doing like almost stream of consciousness, talking, but you do learn a lot of background about Van Halen or what was going on in the music industry, like behind the scenes. Like some of the references that he talks about with certain Van Halen songs, you would never get that from a sort of regular somebody analyzing Van Halen music. He would, he'd say that this particular song uses a rhythm from some African Aboriginal music or something. So you'd learn so much in the 20 minutes, or well, this is the podcast, but also his radio show. You'd get like you'd find out stuff that you wouldn't be allowed to say on like syndicated radio or whatever, because nobody really understands what he's talking about. It's not just, oh, we did this song in 1979 and we used this producer with that and it was a big hit. It's not like that. It's like so detailed. Like what he's talking about is sort of uh, very interesting, but it's just a bit too crazy for. Is it a morning radio?
Yeah, it was morning radio. So, but what I'm saying is this: I want to give two examples. And I want to give a shout out to you, Wasted. A person like you, Wasted, with all your talent and your knowledge and your ability to talk and communicate, you would have been excellent with David Lee Roth. But someone to bounce back and forth with. We just did a show, our last show, where we were talking about David Lynch. Could you imagine David Lee Roth sitting down with David Lynch? How weird that conversation would have got. How
God.
interesting that conversation would have got.
I think that the vibe or what I got from what the studio execs or whoever people running the radio station were saying is that he's too much of like a egomaniac. Like he even argues with fictional characters in the show. Like he always mentions famous people and he says, this person says this about music, but it's not like that at all. And then he tells you his like personal like interpretation of or viewpoint. So it seems like he couldn't really have a conversation with anybody. I'm just take maybe it's like that. Is that it's very difficult to get along with him because he has his own set view. He's not like an
Sure.
interviewer.
That's
It
why
just
you
seems
book.
to be like
That's why you
yeah.
go and you book a Bill Maher or you book a Norm Macdonald and you have them go in and talk to him. Someone that on an intellectual standpoint he sees as an equal, and then you just have to go back and forth and argue. And I'm going to tell you, that's going to be more interesting than Howard Stern going, "Oh, she's riding the Siberian." Hoo, 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 hoo. You know what I
I think
mean?
that would be the answer. I think it's not actually getting on guests. It would be getting on hosts. So every week or every day, you trying to book a host to host David Lee Roth, and then he would be the entertainment, and you basically everybody's interviewing Norm Macdonald interviewing David Lee Roth. Then it would be like Rogan or somebody like that. So they just every day you would be getting like David Lee Roth interviews in a morning show setting somehow. That could work, but I don't think he has the consistency to do all the stages of a show in order. That's what the impression I got. He's just going off on mad tangents wherever he wanted to go.
So is Alex Jones, but he somehow makes it work. But I think we really touched in depth on David Lee Roth. I think this is a lot further than you guys thought we were. Um, I encourage the audience to go give David Lee Roth show a listen. You might hate it, you might love it, but I'm going to tell you something. You're going to feel something about it. You're not going to go. It won't just be, you'll have a strong emotional opinion about it one way or another. And that says he's doing something right. Sometimes it's not good, sometimes it's not great, but it's also not bad. All right, guys, we're going to move on to our next topic, and this next topic is near and dear to my heart. So we were doing a show, and we did a show, and we were trying to come up with a name title for it. And we're going to try to put some art to it so we can attract some viewers, because, boy, we love you guys who view our show on Rumble and on YouTube and all the podcasting platforms. We appreciate you listening to Shit Radio. And I got into an argument with Wires and Noise. And the argument was about cows. You guys are probably wondering, why would you argue about cows? Well, Wires and Wasted both insisted to me that cows are funny. So I need to know, are cows funny? Wires, why do you find cows so funny?
They moo. They moo. They don't seem very. They don't seem very bright. I don't know. They look funny. They make funny sounds. They're food. Like, I don't know. There's lots. If you want a good laugh, put a cow into a situation and people will laugh at it because they're just funny to look at. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it was the cow methane. It was cow farts, and the aliens. Isn't it the cow farts and the methane had attracted the aliens down from space?
That's right.
Because they were following the scent of the methane. I think it was something like that, wasn't it?
Methane. Hold on.
I wasn't going to say anything.
Well, this is the guy that I'm arguing with. He calls it's the methane gas. No, it's methane wasted.
Is that a British way of saying it? Like,
I don't know. I thought it was methane. I've always said methane. Methane sounds weird. Methane. That's how it's spelling. It's a bit like Bowie.
This conversation wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for cows. And we're all laughing.
Like
we're all laughing.
Zoe is Zoe. So Bowie would be Boe. Bowie. But if you add a O and a W, you get an A sound, so it's Bowie. So I don't know. I'm probably completely wrong, but that's just how I pronounce it. Methane.
So, Wasted, how do you pronounce it again?
Methane.
Are you sure that's not just the Chinese way of saying it?
It might just be how you pronounce things after 8 beers.
Lightweight.
But I remember I wasn't really saying that cows were funny. I was saying that particular thing about methane cows could be a title of a podcast. Like it did, even though it was only like a 2-second thing. Lots of podcasters just pick on some funny word, like cow. Like I don't know what the title was going to be. Like was it methane cows? Could be the title, and people would like look at that particular kind of title and say, "What's that about?" And then they click on it because it's interesting, rather than a title which explains exactly what's in the video, and then they go, "Oh, I'm not interested in any of that, so I'm not going to click on it."
So cows are funny. I'm in the chat with Wasted, and I'm starting to get heated. Liars is already annoyed at me because I was already pissed off about this. So he's like, "I'm taking space." Prasky's just being twat. So I'm gonna take space. So I'm debating this with Wasted, and Wasted just asked me, "What do you mean? How's it funny? Just look at the big dumb face." And like that was his whole argument. Like, Prasky, you're wrong. Just look at them. They're funny. I just couldn't get over the fact that they wouldn't budge. Like this was like a 2-day argument that us three were having, and these two were just like, "Prasky, you're fucking wrong. These cows are hilarious."
They are because they are just dumb animals that eat grass and then get milked. And then a big bull comes along.
That's another thing. We squeeze their tits and drink their milk. Like, this is fucking funny, man.
And there's those black and white ones. And also, they're really dumb because if you go into a cow field, the herd will turn on you and start stampeding towards you. But if you just hold your ground and clap your hands, they all freak out as if the gun has been fired or something and run away from you. So if you're ever being like rushed by a herd of cows, don't run away from them. Just shout and clap at them, and they'll all be scared because they've never really left the field. They've been in that field their whole life, and all they do is eat grass and get violated by aliens, and then they go and get milked. So
And they turn into steak. Like, it's fun. It is a great animal.
that's
These
their
rat
only reason
cats-
for being.
2 days, folks. 2 days of arguing with them, and this is all I got. Like, it just was nonstop. Like, you're just wrong. Cows are hilarious, and they just kept coming up with more like just absurd, stupid things that they find funny about cows. Like, they just wouldn't stop.
They're made into cheese. Like, you can't have a crash slice without a cow.
That's right.
So pizza and cows, basically. Cows, the whole ecosystem is based on cows. Pizzas, cheese, steaks, probably beer, milk, yogurt.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the whole McDonald's to fence from wasted. Like, you wouldn't have McDonald's if it wasn't for cows as wasted. It's next to fence. I already see it coming.
True. Burgers. And burgers are kind of funny too.
How the fuck are burgers funny?
Because they're baby food. It's like you can't have all the ingredients on the plate and eat them with a knife and fork like an adult. You've got to have it layered. You like baby food, then you put it in a round little made up thing you stuff in your mouth.
Wasted. Have you ever walked up to a cow and just mooed in its face? Because I'm thinking that's a possibility with you.
They do that cow tipping. Remember the cow tipping?
Yeah.
Where you sneak into the field and they're asleep, and then if you push them, they'll fall over.
Yep.
That's so
I don't know.
Sure do.
That's not a nice thing to do, but
Myers seems like he's done it because I'm like completely horrified about doing it because I feel bad for the poor cows, and Myers is like, fuck him, I tip them bastards over all the time.
I have not actually pushed a cow, but I have been with people who have pushed the cow.
Why
So
would
I
you
wasn't
do
the
that?
one doing the pushing.
Oh,
And
why? They don't hurt nobody.
have you ever
just
stepped in a
cows,
cow
man.
pat? Cow pats are funny. Have you ever stepped in a cow pat? Because
That's a pile of shit, isn't it?
yeah, it's just like it's so like liquid diarrhea that forms a skin on the top of it. So when you're walking along, you might not notice that it's not just flat mud; it's a big cow pat. So when you step in it, you just break through into the cow diarrhea.
I'm pretty sure when you assholes watch Twister, you're like, oh my god, my favorite part of the movie is when the cow goes by
Dude.
twice.
Is it not a memorable scene? Everybody knows it. Everybody laughs at that scene because it's funny. Because it's a cow. And it's flying through the air. It's mooing. Murr.
Folks, this is what I'm dealing with. I'm telling you right now, when I'm going to hit episodes up.
They only know one word as well: moose. I've never
Moo.
heard
That's it.
a cow say anything different other than moo.
In here, trying to get descriptions done, trying to get titles right, so we can get the views. Hopefully, entertain people, and the whole time these two assholes are just nonstop.
But also, they're kind of like a harem.
God.
A bull basically has like it's kind of like a field is like a brothel of cows for the bull.
Now cows are whores.
Yes.
You can see it.
Of course, you can see it. Why am I surprised? Why would I be surprised? I mean, is there anything else you two find funny about cows?
The udders.
What the fuck is the udders? Are you talking about their things you milk?
Yeah.
What's funny about that?
They're sort of like 3 or 4 nippled breasts that produce milk.
Then we fucking drink it.
So you're basically drinking cow's milk. Like, would you drink like breast milk?
No,
No.
but cow's milk is okay.
Yeah. It's actually strange if you think about how much milk you have with cereal.
I had a bowl of cereal today, and let me tell you, I had a lot of milk in it. A lot of milk.
How funny was that milk?
Well, I was laughing, but
Those
Serious
are
audience,
the tricks.
you got to feel
Tricks
for me.
funny.
This is
yeah,
what behind the scenes when I'm making the show. Iris is behind the scenes editing, doing the post production. Lisa does the descriptions, and I we try to come up with titles, make sure the description looks right, and it's nothing like as soon as cows are involved, if there's a cow mentioned, like, oh my god, cows. And yeah, I got nothing.
in the thumbnail and description and the title.
Obviously, this episode they have to be. Can't wait. Well, we're going to be moving on to our next topic. I think we might have an issue coming up for anybody who's a fan of the James Bond franchise. So it turns out this week, the Broccoli family, who's owned the James Bond franchise since its inception, has sold the rights over to Amazon Studios. So not only were the last couple of Daniel Craig James Bond movies utter shit, um, now they're going to be doing a Amazon Studios James Bond. So I don't know what to expect. Maybe Timothy Chalamet can be the new James Bond. I seriously doubt we're ever going to get the James Bond that we all grew up watching. The womanizer badass is probably gone. So I'm expecting woke James Bond here. Thoughts and opinions, gentlemen?
At least they didn't sell it to Disney.
What's that chick's name that's in that Wicked movie? That creepy looking black chick that's always like having to touch Ariana Grande in her like starved ass. They cast her as Bond.
But is Amazon known for being woke and PC and all that shit? I mean, I know Netflix is. Netflix is fucking renowned for um destroying franchises, as is Disney. But um, is Amazon? I don't know. I mean, I have Amazon Prime. I watch a lot of movies on Amazon Prime. There's
They're doing really well with Reacher. I read the books. My dad's read the books. They're really doing a good thing with Reacher. They did go with Jack Ryan. I didn't watch any of the Lord of the Rings things they did, but they're questionable. They're definitely questionable. Some of their movies they like make for like Amazon, like oh here's an Amazon movie for only Prime members. They're definitely pushing an ideology there, and with the James Bond one, I mean you got to be concerned. I mean, you really, really do when it comes to these big studios now buying a franchise that they don't know, like they don't understand like what the fans want. Can you think of any franchise in the last I don't know 2 decades that like they really delivered what the fans wanted? Like Marvel did for a time, and then they just completely shit the bed.
yeah, they sure did.
Mission Impossible.
Oh, yeah, okay, but that's
Yeah.
because Cruise knows and loves the character. Like, Tom Cruise tells them what they're going to do. If they don't want to do it, he's like, "Fuck you." He's got enough blackmail on everyone in Hollywood, I imagine, that he can do whatever the hell he wants when he wants. And those Mission Impossible movies are spectacular.
They are.
Yeah.
John Wick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've not seen four yet, and I've heard four ends in a way that it might be a closing, but kind of leaves the door open because I know they're trying to make John Wick 5. But they did come out. They're coming out with Ballerina now, which is an offshoot of John Wick, where it's a female lead who's an assassin. So I mean, and I'm not saying I hate female leads in movies. I like A Long Kiss Goodnight with Gina Davis is one of my favorite action movies. I mean, Sarah Connor. We've had this talk before. Sarah Connor was, amazing as a hero. Ripley was amazing as a hero. It's not that I dislike females in that role. It just stop trying to take roles that are specifically made for a male character and make it
Right.
into. I'd be pissed if they did that to female roles. You know what I mean?
Now I have a question.
Sure.
Regarding James Bond franchise. So did the Broccoli family sell the rights to James Bond, i.e. the the back catalog and all future movies, or is it just the back catalog, or is it just future movies? Because if it's just the back catalog, I mean that's pretty awesome because we're gonna have James Bond movies on demand. I know for a while they were on Netflix, or at least in Canada they were for a while, but they're gone now, and
Oh,
it makes sense now as to why they're gone because they're gone to Amazon. So, is it? Do you know what I mean? Because if it's just
yeah.
the back catalog, it's not that bad.
No, they're thinking of, well, the story is they're thinking of doing new movies, but also doing it like Star Wars, where they're going to have like Miss Moneypenny spin-off shows.
Dear
So
God,
the
They have
quality is
the
not going
creative
to be the same level.
dear
There's going to
God.
be more of it, like animated series and like Star Wars.
Let me confirm this per Variety. James Bond shocker. Amazon MGM Grand. Yeah. Per. Here we go. Per Variety. James Bond shocker. Amazon MGM gains creative control of 007 franchise as producers Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson step back. So they have full creative control. So they own everything. They have creative control. They can do whatever the hell they want to.
Wonderful. Well, say goodbye to that franchise. I agree with you now, Brasky. Say goodbye to that franchise.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the only way they could save it if they want to go, hey, listen, boys and girls, Gerard Butler's your new James Bond. Congratulations, everybody. It's going to be okay. We're going to
That
open
would
up a
be
scene, be smoking a cigarette at the poker table and, drinking a martini. If that's not the case, then we're all screwed. But then again, I mean, that's just how society is. Things change. As Don Amici in the great movie once said, things change. The title of the movie was Things Change also. So, Wasted, you have more knowledge and more of a, how do I say this, a history with the James Bond movie. Can you explain that to us? What your opinion is, where the James Bond movies originated?
Yeah, I was just I was just thinking with these with Amazon taking over and Jeff Bezos, you can sort of normally James Bond movies reflect the times that they're in. So you can imagine them being full of like big tech technology, gadgets, like going to the next level. You know, James Bond in virtual reality type thing. But I was thinking about going back to the origins of James Bond, like in just before the James Bond movies. It's really about the producers. Like Cubby Broccoli is the most famous producer, but then there was Harry Saltzman, and he was involved in making these like British realism movies, which were more. That's the reason why he bought the rights to the Ian Fleming British like crime, spy novels. Ian Fleming's because they were part. He was thinking of them. They're going to be like part of this sort of British realism thing going on. Because he before Doctor No, he produced Look Back in Anger in '59 and Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, which have this like working class character who's like a bit of a lad drinking on the weekends and going out partying and then having relationships with like married women or like upper class women. So then the next book series that he did, Harry Saltzman, he bought the Ian Fleming books because he saw Bond uh, could be changed from in the Ian Fleming novels. The Bond character is more upper class and more cynical and more entitled, like as a rich guy. But Saltzman envisioned him as being like more like Sean Connery. So he's more of like a working class type guy who's kind of getting one over on the system, which kind of, so the Ian Fleming novels and the early Bond movies have this sort of element of British realism. Like the books, the all the gadgets are kind of the espionage in it is all real, more realistic, in the Ian Fleming books, and all the gadgets are more like more realistic. They're small, like little mechanical devices or pens and stuff, and and the relationships and with women in the books are much more complicated than in the movies. But early on, it's a little bit more complicated in the early Bond movies, and then you've also got the sort of espionage world and the non-linear plots. There's non-linear plots in all the Ian Fleming books, which really didn't go into the movies at all. So there's kind of like a difference between the books But Harry Saltzman was planning on doing more of a sort of British realism thing with Bond. But as it developed, and with Pinewood Studios and the 007 stage in 1977, they built this big stage for Roger Moore, for the Roger Moore movies, where they could do these big special effects and things. So it kind of changed from being this kind of British realism, like more like realistic books and movies, and it kind of just became more and more of a fantasy through the Roger Moore movies.
No, wait. Would you say that I get that with the Roger Moore movies, which I'm not a big fan of? I actually prefer Timothy Dalton over him, and then the Pierce Brosnan one, obviously, really went in the other direction, more towards Roger Moore. But would you say that the first Daniel Craig James Bond movie, Casino Royale, went back to that realism? Because I would say that's probably the most realistic James Bond instead of the original Sean Connery movies that we ever got. Like, it was on base. He had a very complicated relationship with Vespa. It was realistic. It was very gritty, and it was great. It's personally my favorite Bond movie. And I think I was going to. I just want to get your opinion here in a second. I think the Daniel Craig Bond movies are really weird because I really love two of them, and I hate the rest of them. Like, I absolutely love Casino Royale. I thought Skyfall was really good. I can't stand Quantum of Solace. I don't even remember the name of the next one, which has the Blofeld character in it, which I just thought was horrible. I think the last one was No Time to Die, which I never even watched that piece of shit. I think at one point they were trying to get back to that, but then Hollywood, became Hollywood, and they just had to fuck it up and make it overcomplicated again. What do you think?
Yeah, I think also the Timothy Dalton ones in the 90s were more gritty. But then I think is it GoldenEye? The Pierce Brosnan ones, they became just more like basic, like high level action movies. And then I think with the Daniel Craig movies, normally the movies jump around. The books, they don't follow the order of the books. Doctor No is like the sixth book, but I think they did all the main books early on, and then Quantum of Solace and those ones they're not based on the books. But they have more of a continuity, a storyline running through all the movies, the Daniel Craig movies. Whereas in the other Bond movies, it's just Spectre. That's the only thing that really, this looming bad guy that nobody knows who it is. So I think that's one of the things. But they did get a bit more realistic. The Bond it's the Roger Moore era that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think the Roger Moore continued with the Pierce Brosnan era, and I think you're right. The Timothy Dalton era was kind of the break in between, and I think the Timothy Dalton era is very, very underrated. What do you got? License to Kill, and then what's the other one called? Come on, Wasted.
Living Daylights.
Living Daylights, yeah, and both of those are very, very solid Bond flicks. The chicks are hot as hell. Timothy Dalton plays a very realistic James Bond. Robert Davies a bad guy in one of them, and he's fantastic. The music's good in it. I mean, I think those are pretty solid Bond movies. I mean, they're better than Roger Moore ones, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think the Timothy Dalton movies, they were at the time easier to watch. Like, they reacted to from the 80s movies, which were all cheesy. In the 90s, people were watching more like gritty. They wanted more gritty movies, but it didn't have the jokey element of Bond. It was almost like not a Bond movie. But I really like Living Daylights and License to Kill.
Yeah, those are ones I prefer. I mean, the Pierce Brosnan ones were also hit and miss, but maybe it's time for the franchise to go away for a while. Sometimes you got to go. All right, we've kind of told all the stories we can tell out of this, and let's either reboot it in a couple of years or a decade. Give it time to breathe. I think maybe James Bond needs to breathe for a bit.
Like, who do you think's going to take over? I've got a feeling that Bezos is going to want Tom Cruise to do the Bond.
Tom Cruise is like early to mid 60s, dude. He's not going to be Bond.
I don't know. Bond is normally kind of older. He doesn't really do that much. I know Daniel Craig was starting to do some running in the Quantum of Solace, where he runs up a ladder or something. Yeah, not a lot of crazy action. So maybe Tom Cruise with some lifts in his shoes or something to make him taller.
There's two people I would like. I'd like either Gerard Butler. We're probably not going to get him, or give me Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy
Yeah.
would be such a good James Bond.
I think Tom Hardy. I don't know which movie is it where he plays like a kind of like a James Bond style character. I can never imagine. I always see him as Bane, but I know that you must be able to do like Christian. Is it Christian Bale? Maybe, but they're all getting too old, like you said.
I think Tom Hardy's not too old. Tom Hardy's about the right age to do it. I mean, Christian Bale playing Bond, the only thing I'd be thinking of is American Psycho the whole time, which is hilarious. I'd be all for it. But I think they're probably going to go younger because that's what they always do in these reboots. They cast some 20-year-old person that's usually not right for the role.
Do you think they're gonna go for a woman or a girl, like Charlie Theron or something?
It's a white British guy. Maybe they're going to go the route where James Bond is now an Indian British guy. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Mhm.
That's something that could be possible, but it doesn't make sense. Like I said, it'd be like casting a white person to be Shaft. It's not. It doesn't make sense. White Shaft is not what people want to see, and that's
Well,
not because people are racist. It's because they're used to the character. They invested into the character. They identify the character as a certain way. It's just a character. If you want to make a movie, go ahead and make a movie.
yeah. The thing is, they've used up all the books with, I think, Living Daylights and Octopussy were just short stories. So they basically did all the actual Ian Fleming books with Connery and Dalton, really, and then they were bringing back maybe Living Daylights, or maybe the last one, like Quantum of Solace. I think is it From a View to a Kill? They're all like not based on the books anymore.
And
Like
that's
through
why,
the Pierce Bronson era, and
well,
Quantum of Solace is all.
well, I think we kind of covered the James Bond topic tonight, gentlemen. We'll obviously update you when they do a casting and they announce that they're making a movie, because I'm sure they will. But, Weiss, is there anything else you want to add tonight?
Wasted, very wasted.
Ready?
Like,
Lars, you know what time it is, my friend.
I sure do. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Look for us on YouTube. That's where the main channel is. We're also on Spotify, Rumble, and wherever else you get your podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit like and subscribe. Leave a comment too. We'll get back to you, or I'll get back to you, or one of us will get back to you. We try to answer all of your comments that come in, and we appreciate all the comments that come in. And on that note,
Stop!